really a detour on the central thrust of the talk. I want to return to your observations about the relationship between testosterone and muscle mass in humans versus chimps. And it's an interesting thesis that you proposed, but I'm having a hard time reconciling that with the observation that, for example, we see in humans changes with aggression with age that match changes with muscle mass with age. We see changes in risk-taking with age that match changes in muscle mass with age. And there are some, but the number of studies is still small, but there are some psychological data showing between male within age differences in terms of their self-reported propensity to employ coercion as a function of their strength. So all of that looks more like male muscle mass as a male-male competition device and not as economic productivity device.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where, I mean, I think the argument I'm trying to make is not quite as, I mean, so I'm not arguing that human men don't use their dimorphic musculature for male-male competition. And I think it's clear that when you increase testosterone levels, it increases investment in sexually dimorphic muscle. But I think what's less clear is that if you lower testosterone levels, that there's a concomitant decrease in testosterone if you're working. So I mean, we know that testosterone and just exercise have independent effects on lean muscle mass. And I think there's something different there in the humans. It's clear that in these populations where men are doing a lot of heavy work, they can have really steep declines in testosterone without it really affecting their measures of muscle mass or strength.
So, I mean, one counter then would be, well, you know, if you gave the chimps a Nautilus machine, right? That is, I mean, if they had exertion independent of their foraging activities, because the Polish farmers are engaging in particular kinds of activity that use particular kinds of muscles, that the chimps would show the same pattern, but that sort of ancestral human populations were perhaps not engaging in those kinds of activities. That is, that the Polish farmers are in an evolutionarily novel situation, at least 50,000 years novel, if you want to call that novel. And that a lot of human hunting maybe involves more endurance of slow twitch muscle, more lower body rather than upper body muscle mass. And so I'd be curious to see what, say, your studies of the Hods have revealed in that regard.
Yeah. No, and it's true that in the studies that have been done of hunter-gatherers, there's not a strong relationship between at least these cross-sectional measures of strength across the lifespan and foraging returns. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anyone look, though, within an age class do a stronger man have higher returns. But yeah, I guess the problem is I'm perfectly happy with the idea that muscle mass in humans is used for male competition. It's just it doesn't quite make sense to me that if you're down-regulating your investment in mating effort, then you should necessarily down-regulate your investment in muscles if you're using them.
Right, so my suggestion was maybe they're different patterns.
I think maybe the chimps are doing the same thing, but yeah, it's difficult since all the chimps are presumably sort of doing all the work they need to do. But I don't know, I mean, in humans you just get such a strong effect of behavioral measures and testosterone when men start investing in offspring. And the hunter-gatherer literature suggests that is when they have to do more kinds of provision. So I just think it's interesting to think about. I mean, it's true that there are a lot of data sets, but it's amazing how few data sets actually measure strength or actually measures of muscle mass. I mean, a lot of the things tracking what you're suggesting across the life course, men's investment in competition and so forth, just sort of assume a graph of decreasing strength. But if you actually find studies like this Polish one where you actually measure both, they don't necessarily go together. I mean, you can probably see that just from there's a reproductive ecology literature from people like Rick Berbieskas showing that in non-Western populations, the decrease in testosterone with age is fairly attenuated compared to Western populations. So in the U.S., young men have very, very high testosterone levels, and it decreases sharply across the lifespan until they reach the levels of elderly men in say, Bolivia or some non-Western population. But the difference is that as young men, the Bolivian males have much, much lower levels of T. And some of those lines are almost flat. It looks like the Ache, the young men don't have much higher levels than the old men. But you can bet that the differences in strength are still there. So there's a lot of indication in literature. There's not a one-to-one relationship between measures of strength and measures of testosterone. But people have sort of ignored that, and I just think it's interesting to think about why that is.
We found that so some of the high-ranking males have they don't have particularly high muscle mass, but they do have, and these primate high-ranking males, they do have high levels of T. And he said that part of the male-male competition has to do with social manipulation of coalitions and so forth. So this is a very speculative question, but is there any ideas you might have how you could look at this, but any indication that T can mediate the use of whatever social cognitive abilities are specific to status competition in chimps, or any species in which there's a lot of male-male politics.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's a sense in the chimpanzee literature, I think, and maybe we'll soon have enough alpha males to do this properly. I mean, just anecdotally, you have several sites where we've seen 3, 4, 5 males, and there seems to be a different kind of strategy. So the males who are really big, like Frodo and Gombe is an example of this, tend not to bother with coalitions. They tend to just try to monopolize females completely themselves, and they might have very, very high mating skew during their tenures, but their tenures tend to be short. They can't do that for very long. And then you have alpha males like Mimoso at our site who managed to hang on for 10 or 11 years. But if you look at the reproductive data, he doesn't get all the mates. He's sharing them. And Kim Duffy, a student of Jones, had a real nice paper showing that Mimoso was trading matings for support. So he had a certain subset of adult males who were his allies, who supported him in maintaining his rank, and he allowed them, he didn't interfere in their populations, he gave them a certain stake. So I think there's these different strategies that I think are becoming apparent. And I mean, Mimoso happens to be a particularly small male. He was responsible for like 4 of his points in the way along the line. And so it's possible that we have these two strategies, but yeah, in terms of testosterone actually mediating the psychological aspects of male coalition formation, I've seen anecdotal reports of that. And along the lines of people who are getting testosterone supplementation for some reason, suddenly having urges to call their buddies from college to talk. Just completely anecdotal.
So, why do I'm having trouble understanding why chimp males need to be so big. I mean, why chimps have this hyper-aggressive strategy toward females when other species with high degrees of reproductive skew don't do this? Is it because males are reluctant to compete as intensely with other males because they rely on them? So instead of, you can imagine the male baboons, they don't have relationships with anybody, so there's no cost to just beating the crap out of other males. But chimp males don't want to do that. I mean, I just
well,
want
that's
to
my hypothesis. I don't know if I've seen data on sort of rates of wounding or some sort of measure of the intensity of male-male competition. But,
why do they have to be such jerks?
I mean, the only other I like that explanation. The only other thing I can think of is that I'll just fall back on the social system. And the idea that in these fission fusion kind of systems, you never know what's been going on when you weren't there, so.
But it doesn't seem to work. I mean, these girls, as soon as the guy's not there, they're not like, so you can imagine that if I scare her enough, she will never look at another guy, even when I'm not around, because she just doesn't know when I might turn up, and so. But that's not working very well.
Well, maybe that's what if, you
What if
don't
they
know,
didn't
like,
do
if
it?
they didn't do that, what they would do when he was gone.
But
Well, but
when he's
yeah.
not there, they are soliciting.
But what if the alpha males were being friendly when they were there? Maybe when they weren't there, the rates would go up even more.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's obviously possible. It's just that it's not working that well. I don't know, but
Although
yeah,
it
absolutely.
took a lot of data
Yeah.
to find those.
Yeah.
It took many years of data to get a decent sample of times when the alpha male was not a part of
Right, because when there's an estrous female, he makes it his business to be there. Yeah, right.
But there clearly seems to be
But
a
then-
system.
Then again, it doesn't, if he's gonna, so then he has two strategies, scare the crap out of her, stick with her. And they are doing the, stay in the party with the estrous female strategy.
I mean, I think,
Not completely.
I mean, I don't know how this compares to baboons, but I think part of it is just that even ignoring the fission fusion, when you're in a big group of chimps like this, and a male is trying to compete with other males, trying to keep the other males away from the females. So I mean, she has a strong interest in mating with all the other males. And since the average population is 6 seconds or something, I mean, it doesn't take, I mean, the male goes to chase another male away, and then suddenly she slips behind the tree with the mate males who are waiting. So, I mean, maybe.
That's just like the yeah. They have to worry about that too, and they are very sensitive to those opportunities. But I don't know, it's just kind of curious.
It's just bizarre from the Capuchin perspective, where we have almost 100% skew, no mate guarding, and almost no male to female aggression.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never figured out what makes our system work, but obviously there is another alternative besides what these chicks are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Be nice for example. Make it like
They're not that nice, but they're not.
yeah, I know. It's very interesting. I mean, I believe the data.
Yeah, male chimps are not nice.
And they like the older females, so you can't have it both ways.
I was curious on the same, sort of on the same theme. I wasn't sure if I got correctly what you were arguing about the issue of male coercion versus female choice, because you raised that it's possible that females might prefer aggressive males. There might be reasons why. I mean, broadly speaking, if aggressive males have higher reproductive success, then that might be the male that you want to mate with, right? So, but it seemed like then later on in the talk you were suggesting that it's not female choice that's producing this correlation between mating success of aggression. Did I misread you? So you sort of had this hypothesis that said it's more that females are doing this to avoid the male coercion rather than actively choosing to mate with the aggressive males.
Right. I mean, I guess the reason I'm resistant to the idea that there are some males who are just aggressive and females like them is that doesn't. I mean, there's such a rich body of data in chimps suggesting that male aggression is strategic. That it's elegantly tailored to the context. I mean, males don't bother to be aggressive toward the nulliparous females. They're aggressive when it suits their interests to be aggressive, and that's why I think it's telling to compare the pop and the periovulatory period with the days before it, just because if the females really are trying to do what a lot of species do, I mean, in a lot of species, females assist the male in mate guarding attempts because they want to concentrate maternity in the male. If you look at a lot of ungulates, if males try to chase a dominant male away or they get around him, the females try to avoid those males. They're actually helping the dominant male to mate guard them. That's not at all what happens in chimps. I mean, the females just really look like they want to mate with more individuals than the alpha male is letting them. I think if their interests were aligned in that way, you should see some indication that males don't need to be so aggressive. It just doesn't. It strikes me as unlikely that males just can't constrain or can't modulate their gland.
Right. No, I get that. I mean, there definitely needs to be some other reason for why this aggression is there. That would be a sort of exogenous thing you'd have to explain. It seems like the data make it difficult to tease apart coercion from female choice. I mean, there's a correlation, and it seems. You'd have to have a weird story for why they prefer it. I'm thinking of things like cichlids, where they actually fight with the males in order to assess their quality, and then they mate with the ones that are better. At least that's my understanding of that story.
But the other thing is outside of the dyads that include the alpha male, these are all different males. So every female has males that she approaches and males that she doesn't. And in every case between the dyads, it's the female approaching the aggressive male, but they're all different males. So it's not like as though there's some males who are just aggressive, except for the alpha. There's not some males that are aggressive. I mean, they're forming this relationship. So one of the other things we want to do is see how these relationships develop. Like, how is it that you get these males targeting specific females rather than others?
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but it seems like you're talking about mating, but not about paternity, except in one study that wasn't first sight.
No,
Is
we don't
that-
have.
Why not?
We've just been unfortunate in our choice of geneticists. I don't know. No, I mean, we're getting the data now. Right now we're working with Linda Vigilant, who's done most of the stuff at all these sites. And we are getting paternity data. We have 15 or 16 now. We just sent another batch. So we're slowly catching up to the other sites. But it is ironic because we were the first chimp site to actually publish genetic data along with behavioral data, Tony Goldberg, a long time ago. And we're about the last chimp site to actually include maternity data. It's because we had a series of people who, actually, frankly, who were having trouble in the lab getting DNA out of their own hair. I don't want the chimps. Yeah, it's really embarrassing.
Well, that's it.
Well,
We may find some interesting differences in what relates to actual paternity versus what relates to mating.
It's true, yeah, but I mean, even at Gombe, where they now have a pretty good data set, I mean, if you found some pattern that really went against what you were predicting, you might think again. But
More on this nuance between the data that support female choice versus male coercion.
yeah, it's just any kind of nuance thing. I still think the number of paternities in absolute terms is so low, and there's so much stochasticity that I think it's going to be difficult to, unless a pattern turns up that's really against this, like the really nice males are the ones who are all father and offspring.
But you've been collecting data for a long time, so you can assess paternity of animals that are 5, 6, 7 years old now.
Yeah. We'll get there.
On that slide about females initiating copulations most with the non-aggressive males, were the bars reversed in the coding? Because I thought you
Oh,
were
that's
saying the
possible.
opposite of what you said.
Because I redid the colors on some of these slides. And I might have done it backwards. This one? No.
No.
This one. Oh yeah, that's just backwards. Sorry, I just switched.
Oh, so the blue is the non-aggressive and the red's the aggressive.
Yeah. So there's 4 females there who never initiated the copulation with the males who were least aggressive.
And that's not confounded by kinship or anything else. They're brothers.
You can imagine that your brothers are not very aggressive. I mean, I'm not saying it's true, but you can imagine your brother's not very aggressive to you, and you actually also don't want to have sex with them.
I don't think. All of these
You can imagine.
females transfer from other communities, so they're not related to.
And so why are they so, I think that, I'm a little bit puzzled about why they don't bother with nulliparous or young parasites. I mean, what's the cost of pursuing those females? I mean, I know they're less successful
That's
moms.
true. I mean,
but
there's
they're
not much of a benefit, but it would seem like since there's not much competition.
Yeah,
They
it's not like
mate
they would.
with them. They mate with them, they just don't fight them.
It's true, but I mean, you do get in some of these data sets the low-ranking males are more likely to conceive with these nulliparous females just because they actually do invest a little bit in them since they're sort of excluded from the parents females. But yeah, I mean, the only idea I have is, I mean, if you count it up, it takes a nulliparous female in our site 5,000 or 6,000 copulations before she produces a baby. Whereas for the Paris females, it might be 200 or 300 copulations or something. Because the nulliparous females, they have this long period of adolescent subfecundity where they're not likely to conceive. And it looks like males just aren't very good at judging where that ends. It's led Richard Wrangham to suggest that nulliparous females have concealed ovulation and Paris females don't.
How long is this period of estrus?
The period of axial swelling, or the,
Yeah.
25 days or something.
You also had an effect of old Paris females. It seemed like the guys were more hot for the old Paris females than the
Yeah.
middle-aged ones. So it can't just be adolescents up to 20. There must be something else going on. And if guys are more willing to fight over these old gals, there must be some extra fitness benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The old female, the problem is there's a number of things about old females. They tend to be higher ranking and have better access to resources and are sort of proven reproducers and so forth. It's hard. I haven't made much progress trying to figure out why you get that old female effect.
That extraordinary low rate of fertility is obviously part of this whole picture now. I mean, that's an important piece of information that just should be woven into this somehow, because that's obviously an involved strategy, maybe to enable the females to trick every male into thinking they could be the father, or into the system.
Yeah, sorry, that's a theory of mine, Paul. I sometimes forget that everyone doesn't know that another person females take forever.
I know that, but still, I mean, those young Paris ones.
But all of them take so long. I mean, you say the Paris ones take, what did you say?
Oh no, it's maybe 200, 300, 400. Depends on.
So they're cycling during, they're having sex during cycles in which they're not ovulating, yes? Or what do you think?
They can, but I mean, even in an ovulatory cycle, if they have a swelling for say 20 days, and there's 10 males, and each male they might copulate more than once in a day. It doesn't take long to get up to a couple hundred.
But that's still a lower rate than in humans, for example.
Oh yeah.
Substantially lower, which is what Lynn's point was.
No, but you can't, if that's the reason, you can't tell what the rate is. Suppose it took 10 to achieve fertilization, and because of the social system, she
That's
copulates
true.
100 times. You need more, I mean, the numbers just don't tell you.
That's right.
That's a good point. Yeah, so the human data aren't comparable.
What proportion of meetings take place in consortships? Away from.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get data on consortships because they're purposefully removing themselves from being detected by other chimps. But we're starting to look at the long-term data on consortships. But, I mean, we only have maybe 15 observed consortships, and then some you can infer when two individuals just sort of disappear for a month or two, and then they reappear together, and the swelling going down or something. But, we know that most of the conceptions don't occur in consortships, because we can time when the conception was based on the birth, and see that actually all the sites, I think the vast majority of them occur in small female. But yeah, the consortship is the one really interesting area where females probably do have quite a lot of room for choice. I mean, Girl has described some of these consortships as being coerced. But that's not real easy to do, because the way that usually works is they start by forcing the female to go off before she's even started swelling, and they try to keep her in some remote part of the forest. The problem is females often don't like that, because you basically have to take them somewhere where there's no food to get away from the other chimps. But you know, yeah, that's one situation where females can go along and potentially influence. I don't know, there could be a cost though in terms of if you've been on a consortship for a long time, you're going to hate and miss the opportunity to avoid fantasy.
We have time for one last question.
So on the idea of consortships, if there's so low success rate, I mean, do you think that's something weirdly new or unique about the system? Like maybe that's not the historical case, or how did that behavior evolve? Like it's still ineffective at having kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it never was, but I can't remember the data from Gombe. I mean, it's not insubstantial. I think at Gombe, or maybe Mohali had the highest rates, maybe of successful consortships, so maybe like 18% of conceptions or something took place in consortships. But it's clearly a viable strategy. But again, a lot of them, you don't get a female to one consortship that necessarily might be wise.